I'd now like to invite our fourth speaker, Professor Paul Torzillo, who is a respiratory physician in Newtown. Thank you, Paul.
G'day everyone. In cities like Sydney, traffic-related air pollution, which the scientists call TRAP, which is pretty prophetic, is a major contributor to total air pollution for the cities. It's about a third, it's about 30% of the total air pollution that cities like ours experience. It's got two main components. The first is what comes out of exhaust emissions. So that's got compounds like carbon monoxide and nitric oxide and nitrogen dioxide and sulphur dioxide. It's got benzenes, things called hydrocarbons, all of which have got a definite association with cancer. Then there's a second component to TRAP, and that's road dust, fine particles from bitumen and rubber wear. And those two components contribute to these things that they call particulate matter. That just means stuff in the atmosphere. It's all small. Some of it's really small and some of it's really, really small. And that gets absorbed into your lungs and into your body. All these things are bad for health. There's overwhelming international evidence now from organisations like WHO that shows that that sort of pollution, if you look at what happens across big cities, it increases the number of heart attacks people have, strokes, it increases deaths from heart disease and deaths from respiratory disease. And there's some new evidence in the most recent WHO publication which says it probably impairs lung growth in children. It makes a contribution to diabetes. So these things on a population basis have a big impact on health. There are three things that are particularly important about that. The first is these are effects that you best see when you study health in big populations. They're not things that you see easily if you do a 2-year study in a few streets in Newtown or St Peters. The second thing is that these health effects occur both with long-term exposure and with repeated short-term exposure. Again, the most recent WHO evidence suggests that repeated short-term exposure has definitely got a health consequence. And the last thing that's important is there's no evidence about a safe, lower level of any of these things. So less is better, but less isn't safe. So almost all the important agency reports talk about mitigating health effects. The commonest word that you see in any of these reports is the word mitigate. So what happens? What happens when you get a project like WestCONnex? There've been lots of these around the world. What do? Well, the first thing to know is that the levels of this sort of traffic-related air pollution are high around busy streets, and they're high probably for up to half a kilometre each side. Depends on the topography and wind direction and various other things. Projects that involve tunnels redistribute traffic-related pollution. So some places might be a bit better off and other places will be worse off. So the tunnels themselves, the stacks, the exit point, the entry point, all these places are likely to have higher levels. Although you'll see on the website, it's hard to prove this, and that's because of a measurement problem that I'll talk to you about in a second. Importantly, when traffic emerges from tunnels, surprisingly, it has to go somewhere. So it goes back onto roads, and when it goes to those roads, then those roads have higher use, higher traffic, higher pollution levels. For a whole host of reasons, it's incredibly hard to give a precise measure of how risky is it to live near a stack, near a tunnel exit or entry point, near a ventilation shaft. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. But it doesn't refute the fact that the overwhelming evidence is traffic-related air pollution is bad for health. Now, many people say, and you'll see this on the websites of every agency involved, that what should be done therefore is to monitor air quality. In fact, agencies are very keen on this. But there are a lot of questions. The first is, how many components of some of the ones that I mentioned are going to be managed? Do you measure them continuously or intermittently? How many monitors do you use? Where are they located? And how does the public access this information? I'll have 45 more seconds. In a really big National Health and Medical Research Council review of tunnel-related air pollution, the expert committee in their key summary said, and I quote, "We'd like to comment on how difficult it was to obtain data about some Australian tunnels." So if a federally funded National Health and Medical Research Council of eminent scientists can't access the information, how easy is it going to be for us? The international experience with road projects like these is they encourage more traffic. There are more cars and more people use them. This is bad for population health in Sydney, not just in Newtown or St Peters. Traffic and roads have an impact on health. Aside from the ones I've mentioned, they reduce our ability to do a bit of walking or a bit of cycling, even as part of what your daily movement has to be. The big game in here is not monitoring, it's diverting these billions of dollars from these sorts of systems into safe and efficient public transport systems, and that's what we should be concentrating on.